Hello, Brian Weeks here again with another MMCD contract consideration. This video clip will cover the topic of what are the prime contractor responsibilities. In this short video, I'm going to discuss the implications for both the owner and the contractor of designating the general contractor as the prime contractor for WorkSafe BC purposes. The Master Municipal Construction documents were designed in British Columbia for municipal infrastructure here. Although the majority of principles and methods set out in the documents are of general applicability to other municipalities, a few topics were formulated to comply with and take advantage of provisions of BC laws and regulations. The topic of prime contractor is one of those. Thus, as the MMCD is currently written, this topic may not be correct in other jurisdictions. In BC, the Workers' Compensation Act and its regulations are administered by WorkSafe BC. Their representatives are not only responsible for providing compensation and rehabilitation to injured workers, but also for the enforcement of safety rules on both employers and workers. While WorkSafe BC does not have exclusive jurisdiction in British Columbia, it does have jurisdiction on municipal sites. Let's start by defining prime contractor. Section 118 of the Workers' Compensation Act requires that every worksite have someone who has overall responsibility for safety. Normally, this is the owner. When more than one contractor is working on a site, in the language of the Act, a multi-employer site exists, and one entity must be designated as the prime contractor who is responsible for the safety of all workers. Again, this defaults to being the owner of the site. The Act is quite clear that the prime contractor is not directly responsible for the safety of all workers. Rather, the prime contractor is responsible to A. ensure all activities on site which have safety implications are coordinated, and B. take all reasonable steps to establish and maintain a system or process so that all employers are complying with the Act to facilitate the safety of their workers. This latter point is an important distinction. To take a simple example, the prime contractor does not have to train a subcontractor's workers in the specific hazards of their tasks. That's a direct responsibility, but rather must ensure that the subcontractor has done so, the indirect responsibility. Although the distinction is present, the reality is that if there's an accident involving a subcontractor's worker, not only will the WorkSafe inspector question the subcontractor, but also the prime contractor and possibly the owner too. This makes it essential that each party know the scope of their responsibilities. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, we have to distinguish between the owner and the prime contractor, recognizing that once an owner has employed a contractor, the owner loses some control of the activities on the worksite. Section 118 of the Act allows an owner to delegate the prime contractor responsibility. However, this must be done in writing so that both parties have a formal acknowledgement of the transfer. In contracts created using the Master Municipal Construction documents, owners transfer this responsibility via General Condition 21.2.1. Once the contract is in place, the general contractor becomes the prime contractor for the period starting when the contract administrator issues the notice to proceed and ending when the contract administrator issues the certificate of substantial performance. We've been asked, why did we define the period using these 2 points? Well, the contractor does not have permission to be on site until the notice to proceed, so that's an obvious start. Then, at substantial performance, the owner retakes control of the site and starts using it, thus formally ending the contractor's responsibility for site conditions. Section 119 of the Act requires owners to do a couple of additional things. A. Provide a safe working environment for all persons at or near the workplace, and B. Provide the prime contractor with information known to the owner of any hazards that will have to be managed. For example, if the owner knows that the contractor may encounter asbestos cement pipe while performing this contract, the owner must make the contractor aware of this risk even if this contract does not require removal or replacement of the AC pipe. The correct way to do this is to put the information into the tender package so that all bidders have the opportunity to allow for any extra costs which may be incurred as a result. Failure to do so would leave the owner obliged to pay an extra should the contractor incur additional costs due to encountering the AC pipe during the course of the work. But beyond the requirements of the Act, the owner must also facilitate the contractor to act as the prime contractor. Otherwise, should there be an accident on the project, WorkSafe BC may well find that the owner did not successfully transfer this responsibility. What kind of things must an owner do in this regard? 1. First of all, the owner must ensure that there is only one prime contractor on the site at any given time. If not, WorkSafe will certainly say that the owner regained prime contractor responsibility. This seems like an easy problem to avoid, but it can be tricky. For example, say Project 1 is delayed and Project 2 starts in an area overlapping Project 1, but before Project 1's completion. If the owner uses the standard MMCD on both projects, both general contractors will be designated as prime contractor at the same time over the same area. This is unacceptable to WorkSafe BC. Second, the owner must ensure that its own forces understand that when they're on this site, they must comply with the safety rules and requirements of the prime contractor. For example, a requirement to take a site safety orientation prior to work on the site. Failure to do this would be an indication that the owner did not take seriously the transfer of safety responsibility. Third, the owner must advise any other parties working on the site of who is the prime contractor. Often, the owner will have separate contracts with utility companies who must work on the prime contractor's site during the project. Because the prime contractor has no contract with these parties, the prime contractor must have the owner's support to enforce its safety requirements. For example, the prime contractor may have a rule that all vehicles moving on site must have a flashing light in operation. But perhaps most importantly, the owner must check that the prime contractor is fulfilling the role. The owner needs to check that the general contractor not only has a safety program, but that it is in use. And further, that as prime contractor, the general contractor is checking that all other contractors are coordinating activities and following their own comprehensive safety programs. Some time ago, the Ministry of Transportation put together a table of tasks and responsibilities regarding prime contractor status to assist its project managers to ensure their general contractors retained prime contractor status. The Ministry kindly gave the MMCD Association permission to use this document. You can download it for free from our website using the link on the previous slide. At the time of writing this contract consideration, it was document 20 on the website page. This table has a list of duties, a column for who is responsible, and others for the suggested frequency, acceptable criteria, and the documentation required. Whether you work for an owner, consultant, or contractor, I encourage you to review a copy and determine how much of it is appropriate for the scale of project you are undertaking. So now let's touch on what the general contractor must do in its role as prime contractor. First of all, it must have its own comprehensive safety program with an occupational health and safety committee for this site. In addition, the prime contractor needs to have a qualified safety coordinator to liaise with the other contractors on the site. This safety coordinator will be responsible to ensure that every other contractor employs only trained and qualified workers, that those workers have had appropriate orientation to the specific hazards of this site, that each contractor has its own safety program and an active OH&S committee for this project. And finally, that each has designated one person to be the safety contact for liaison on safety matters. The prime contractor also has responsibilities to A, advise WorkSafe BC of the project and who is the prime contractor. B, set out any site-specific safety rules for compliance by all of those working on site or even entering onto the site. And C, verifying that each contractor on site is actually following their safety program, keeping all necessary records, reporting all incidents and accidents, and keeping in good standing with WorkSafe. But most importantly of all, the prime contractor must keep complete records of all safety-related events, including meetings, calls, verbal conversations, warnings, accident records, related correspondence, etc., etc., etc. I cannot stress this enough. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist when one is challenged by the owner, a WorkSafe inspector, or a lawyer. It's all too easy to let the paperwork slide, but that is the only proof that the prime contractor took its responsibilities seriously. One cannot have too many records or photographs. As one last point, keep duplicate copies in separate locations. So, to summarize, in BC, the law requires every multi-employer worksite to have a prime contractor responsible for the safety of all workers. 2, the law allows the owner, who would normally have this role, to delegate it. The MMCD does this through GC 21.2.1. 3, this GC delegates the responsibility for prime contractor status to the general contractor only from notice to proceed until substantial performance. 4, but GC 21.2.1 alone is insufficient. The owner must also see that A, the designated prime contractor is fulfilling the role, and B, the prime contractor's efforts are not being frustrated by others over whom it has no control, such as the owner's forces or any other contractors working directly for the owner on this site. And 5, record keeping by all parties is essential. I hope this has helped clarify this contract consideration. Please check our website for further assistance and to see what other topics are presented in this series. Thanks for watching.